Hello and welcome once again to Alice Springs Airport, and later this afternoon I'm flying up to Darwin with Qantas again. But what's interesting about this flight is that I'll be on board an Alliance Airlines Embraer E190, which Qantas are leasing a whole lot of and fly around a number of different domestic routes. So I thought it might be interesting to go and check it out. So let's go and check in and then I'll show you what this new aircraft is like. I make videos about planes. If you're into trip reports from flights around the world and tours through significant aircraft in museums, then check out my channel and subscribe. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. Those who saw my video a few weeks ago from Alice Springs will notice that this is all quite familiar. I actually had a 3-hour layover here after my flight from Sydney, and I must admit that it's actually a pretty decent airport considering it's in the middle of a desert. Just before security is a 1920 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost on display. This was owned by the local Canal and Airways and was converted to a ute and then used to drag logs along the runway to keep it smooth-ish for aircraft. While Rolls-Royce went on to be known as the pinnacle of luxury, initially they just started making up big, solid and reliable cars. Once through security, there's a cafeteria straight ahead with a decent selection of food and drinks to purchase. And even further ahead is the outdoor seating area. Spinning back around, there's a merchandise store with all the usual well-priced touristy items and magazines, and then in the distant corner is the Qantas Club, which you'll have access to as per any other Qantas flight. I visited and filmed here in the other video, so this time I'll skip ahead to the new aircraft, which is what I'm really most interested in seeing. So while the flight is marketed and sold through Qantas, and in fact some of the newer aircraft will even be painted in QantasLink colours, actually everything else is done by Alliance Airlines. These guys tend to stick to more remote destinations, and in fact they have an interesting fleet of Fokker aircraft, and I've vlogged 2 of their flights to Olympic Dam and Port Macquarie, and I'll link to those in the video description below. Now here's our aircraft, an Embraer E190AR, with the AR bit standing for Advanced Range. The Embraer E series are narrow body, short to medium range jets, stretching from the smaller E170 up to the larger E195. Over 1,500 of them have been built in Brazil since 2002. Alliance have a growing fleet of them, with this one joining them earlier this year. This one is painted in the standard Alliance livery, although as we enter the aircraft you will see the Qantas text on the right of the door. Inside there was a friendly greeting, and first up are the first few rows of business class in a 1-2 layout, so obviously the alpha side would be great if travelling alone, or possibly great if you're travelling with your partner as well. And back in economy the seats are in a 2-2 layout. I'm in 5F, which is the first row of economy and has quite a lot of extra legroom. For comparison's sake, here is row 6, which has a far more normal amount of room. Let's explore my seat in a little more detail, beginning with the individual overhead air vents, which are always my highlight. And a huge amount of legroom. In fact, the seats on the right have more room, as the guy here in seat 5B has the hard wall in front of one foot, and then the aisle with the catering trolleys in front of the other knee. There's a fold-out tray table, which is fairly standard, and great views of the engine and wing. And a sunshade, which I thought every commercial aircraft had up until I flew in a Dash 8. Unfortunately, there's no power plugs or USB ports hidden under your legs, but at least there is a kilometre or 2 of legroom. The doors were locked and we took off to the runway. As you may have seen in another recent video, there's a whole lot of airliners being stored next to the runways here. Because the climate is much less humid here, there'll be a lot less rusting than if they stored them in Singapore or Hong Kong, hence why there's so many aircraft here from Cathay Pacific, Scoot and Singapore Airlines. After reaching the end of the runway, we spun around and took off towards the north and over the city of Alice Springs itself. Down on the ground now, you'll notice a ridge which is part of the McDonnell Ranges. This actually continues many kilometres in both directions from Alice Springs and forms a natural windbreak for the township. There's so much legroom here, I had to invent an ingenious technique for reaching for my bag, which is a good problem to have, and had a look through the flywheel kit that they had handed out to everyone. It has a mask and 2 cleaning wipes. There was a snack and drinks offered in economy class, which was cheese and crackers, and I went with mineral water. Now there is no Wi-Fi, so I got onto my laptop and actually started editing this video, but as there's no power plugs, you'll need to ensure that your battery is fully charged. So I'll explain what's happening with this being a Qantas ticket. Alliance are a separate airline, although Qantas do own a small share of them. This arrangement is called a wet lease, which is where Alliance provide essentially everything, including the plane, the flight crew and the flight attendants, and Qantas just pays them for the final product. This is in contrast with a dry lease, where a company buys the plane, but effectively rent it out to airlines, and often long term. The airline itself will fit out the interior and completely staff it themselves. So while the CSM on my flight did do the standard Qantas welcome, she did mention it's flown by Alliance and the crew were decked out in Alliance uniforms. The whole region was a little hazy unfortunately, so the views weren't as beautiful as last time I approached into Darwin, but I still can't complain too much. So how was the flight? Well, I'll compare it with the 737, which I actually did on the very same route with Qantas a few weeks ago, and that video's on my channel. It's quite subjective, but I reckon it was slightly quieter than the 737, although only a little. The Embraer certainly has more room, with 33 inches of leg room in the standard economy seat, so mine was obviously a lot more, versus only 30 centimeters in the 737 which Qantas fly, and the 2-2 seating is great if you're traveling as a couple, and the single seats in business are also a great option as well. But the Qantas 737, well depending on the specification, but most of them have this, has in-flight entertainment screens, or at least stream entertainment onto your own device. They also have power plugs and USB ports, and all of the 737s have Wi-Fi. The catering economy was the same as Qantas and was adequate for the short flight. The crew were also perfectly friendly and politely enforced the mask wearing, which I thought was good to see. But otherwise, it was perfectly fine. It really depends if you need power plugs, although admittedly most devices should have batteries that last 90 minutes. And if you desperately need Wi-Fi. But otherwise, I'd argue sitting in the front economy row of this is better than the front row of economy in the Qantas 737. But of course, being the hopeless millennial that I am, I did totes miss Instagram by the time we landed. So, by the way, speaking about that, make sure you validate or check me out for a lot more aviation content on my Instagram page. And comment below on what you think about the new Qantas/Alliance E190 service. I think it's great, and I wonder if we'll see more of these smaller routes that can't support the bigger 737s, as there are a whole generation of comfort ahead of things like the Dash 8 Q400 or the ATR 72s, although unfortunately the latter aren't flying in Australia any longer. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and if you're into these types of videos, please check out my channel. Thanks for watching.